We'll give it one more minute for Sarah to come, and then we'll just. All right, you know what? Let's go ahead and get started. Um, check, check, check. You guys hear me well?
Yes, I can.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Sharon, you want to give me your journal notes from yesterday? What you learned yesterday? How would you use it in your classroom or teaching in the future? Any questions? Anything you were confused about? You want to start off?
Okay. As teachers, we should use alteration or using different scenarios to make students understand. Also, we should use pictures and videos. And we should let students speak more than we do.
Anything else?
Okay. We shouldn't be afraid to ask students same questions in a different way.
What do we call that? When we ask questions, the same questions, or we do many things in a different way, what is that called?
Backwards mapping.
No, not backwards mapping.
Sorry, what was it?
Tell her, Blessing.
Alterate. Oh, I can't remember the
Iteration.
Iteration, yes.
Iteration.
Please pronounce it again, Dr. Ray.
Iteration.
Iteration. Am I right?
Iteration. Iteration.
Iteration. Iteration. Okay.
So sometimes
Thank you.
if you hear somebody says, we're going to take an iterative approach. We're going to take an iterative approach. All they're saying is we're going to do this one thing many different ways. Okay. And the reason why we take an iterative approach is because we don't have the same learners in our class. Iteration is a great way to differentiate instruction. That's it.
Okay.
It's a great way to differentiate instruction. All right. Okay. Anything else, Sharon?
Okay.
Let me put that on the I'm gonna put that in the chat so you can get the spelling. Iteration. There you go. So, iterative. Right. Iterative is the adjective. All right. Anything else, Ms. Sharon?
Okay, teachers should take control of the class, but we use different opportunities to get the students to talk a lot. But you say teachers should take control of the class. What about if they are shouting and making noise? How are we going to control them?
Why are they shouting and making noise?
Yeah, like they can't listen. They can't just listen.
Why? What happened to make them shout and make noise?
Maybe sometimes they're just arguing about something, and
Right.
I don't have any way to let them keep quiet and listen.
All right. Okay. Good question. I'm glad that question is asked. A lot of people are afraid to ask that question, actually. I don't get that. In my 15 years of doing teacher training, I rarely get that question asked. And it's a question that every teacher goes through. I think a lot of teachers are afraid to ask that question. But before I respond, I think Ms. Blessing wanted to say something about that question.
Yes. I feel like from what we have learned so far, I feel like at the beginning of the academic year, if you give a clear instruction and a clear instruction and make the class interactive based on your lesson, students will not have a choice than to stick to what is going on in the class. If they are going to be distracted, maybe one or two times, but they will have more. They will distract more with the activity that is happening in the class. I don't know if I make sense.
No, it makes. I see. I understand what you're saying. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, that's what I feel. That's with what we have learned so far. I feel if you make a clear point and
I
then
don't. I don't want you
give
to
them
say.
room
I don't.
to.
I want you to. I want you to stop saying feel. That's what I believe.
Okay,
I want you to try to eliminate the word feel from
feel.
your
Oh, okay.
vocabulary.
Okay.
Only your husband cares about what you feel. Okay.
I believe when we
Mhm.
make a clear when we set a clear rule in the class and then reduce our teacher talk, give
Mhm.
them room to communicate, to express themselves, and
Mhm.
then they will be able to stick to whatever lesson we are doing at the moment, and you as the teacher, you will have little or no distraction, yeah,
All right.
and
Cool.
like outside the teaching. Mm.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. You have to start off right. You have to start off right. Um, if you start off right, like Miss Blessing said, right at the beginning of the school year, then what happens is you create a system, right? And the students know your system, and it's kind of it's kind of I'm going to sound hypocritical for a second, um, because when you when you first start teaching a class and you introduce your class, remember we talked about getting to know your students. Said that a lot, right? And I talk about smiling and being friendly. But initially, especially with young learners, but all learners, but especially young learners, you also have to set yourself as the authority, right? So there is a caution in being overly friendly. That's why I say be friendly, but you don't have to be their friend. All right. Because what happens is if you're their friend, then they're gonna start yelling and screaming, and you're gonna lose control because you're one of the team. So remember we talked about emic versus edic. You remember, I think we had to talk about emic versus edic a couple of days ago. Remember, emic is when you observe from inside the group. Edic is when you observe outside the group. As teachers, we, especially with young learners, we want to be etic. We want to be outside the group because, and then as the learners become older and older, we can become more emic with them, like in high school, middle school, like upper middle school, high school, obviously university, and adults. But with younger kids that don't have that intellectual capacity, you don't want to be overly friendly with them because then they will lose respect for you. So it's a balance where you can't be mean. Being mean never works, but the students, the learners also have to know that there's boundaries, that what you say go, and that you're not going to tolerate nonsense, and there has to be consequences, temporary consequences, not long-term consequences, but temporary consequences for their misbehavior. Hold on one second. All right. So they have to. So they have to know that there's consequences for their action, and you set that tone right at the beginning of the school year. You can't do it at the middle of the school year. You can't do it at week 3, because once they become your friend and it's playtime, it's always playtime. And it's going all you're always going to be you're always going to have classroom management issues with them, because the students are like, oh, this is my friend. Teacher's my friend. And parents like that because, oh, she loves her teacher. But then there's a reduction in learning. And then the parents are upset with you at the end of the school year when the learner hasn't learned quite much. It's a big problem here in Saudi, because a lot of schools in Saudi are like, oh, just be nice to the kids. And I've seen principals give students toys for misbehaving, awarding them for misbehaving. And it just, you talking about me getting upset. Uh, because it doesn't do anything for the learner. Yes, I'll be the first one to tell you, don't hold grudges with learners. You gotta let it roll off your back, but also you can't let them get away with murder, because they will disrupt other learners' learning. And the more that you let them get away with it, what happens is you're giving them independence. Remember, we want them to be independent, but it's the wrong type of independence, right? It's the I can do whatever I want in this class independence, right? I think I told you about my first department chair, Miss Alice Taylor. She used to always tell me, "You are the big dog in the classroom. You're the big dog. They're puppies. You're the big dog." And if you ever watch a dog with puppies, or a mother cat with her kittens, she doesn't negotiate with the puppy. Dogs don't. The alpha dog does not negotiate with the beta dogs, right? And but there's a respect there, even though he or the whoever the alpha animal um, is in charge, they respect him, and that's what you want. And he also gives them independence and all that good stuff. All right. So just keep in mind, lost the that you have to maintain law and order right from the very beginning. Students need to know that Miss Sharon does not play, but you're kind, you're fair, right? You're agreeable, but you don't tolerate nonsense in your classroom. Okay. And you have to be able to communicate that with the administrators also. All right. That, hey, look, we're not going to give this child a toy. I'm not going to reward learners for being disruptive. Okay. So, so create a system. Make sure the system is easy to use. Okay. Also, remember, with young learners, with all learners, even adults, they need breaks. So give them time to yell and scream. Give them their time where they can yell and scream. And that's where the speaking comes in. Remember, we talked yesterday, I get a little upset, or I get a little worried, not upset, but I get a little worried when I walk in the school and everything's quiet. That makes me nervous, because there are times where students should have the opportunity to raise their voice and learn in authentic, or engage each other in authentic ways. All right. When you're hanging out with your girlfriends, everybody's not nice and hi. Okay, I'm gonna let you talk next, and I talk. No, you talk over each other. You're loud. You're laughing. You know what I mean? But you guys make it through the conversation, and everything's fine. And you learn a lot through those transactions, because it's authentic, and that's how we actually operate. All right. So if you are mandating that these children be polite and act in these very unauthentic ways, then they're gonna eventually their RES and their amygdala is gonna be like, I need to yell and scream, right? And you can say be quiet all you want, but you didn't give them the opportunity to yell and scream or get it out or get that energy out, and then you get into a bind, right? So Miss Blessing was right. Set the system right from the very beginning. Have rules, very few rules, right? Have consequences for those rules. Those consequences should be temporary, and make sure you enforce the rule. Again, you're not going to be a dictator. You're not going to be a tyrant. You're not going to be mean. You're not going to be nasty. You're not going to yell at them, right? But they also know that when they overstep a boundary, there's a consequence for that action. Okay. You got to do that right from the very beginning. Okay. If you set a rule and then you don't enforce the rule or there are no consequences, the rule doesn't mean anything. It means nothing at all. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions? Number one, does that answer your question? Does that answer your question, Ms. Sharon? Yes.
Yes, yes, it does. Thank you.
Anything else?
Nothing.
Okay. All right, we'll go with Ms. Blessing next.
First of all, I want to say what I did yesterday with control practice. I practiced control practice with one of my students yesterday, and I observed at a point she was more confident, she was more eloquent, and it built her up, just for the few minutes I spent with her. She was really confident, and I hope when I see her today, I'll get more positive response from that. And going to what we studied yesterday, speaking and reading, I believe this will help the students build confidence, improve their language and skill practice. Also help them in communicating with other people.
Yeah. Miss Sarah?
Yes.
Can you give me your journal response from yesterday? You there? You with us? You're muted. Miss Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You in the where we at? We in the vampire? You in vampire mode today?
Hotel Transylvania. I'm not sitting somewhere with the bad lighting. Let me see. Oh, the light reflection is so much on my side. Here we go.
There we go.
Better?
Much better.
Okay. On yesterday, journal, I think I also did like a blessing. I put my own also in practice, but it's something I usually do also. I let the student express themselves more in class because I have different students who are all beginners in English. So most of the time I let them use their own words in class to make sentences or explain to each other how they understand the lesson in class. And I see how confident they are from how I made them, and it's really working.
Yeah. Confidence is key.
Yes.
That's our own job. That's 80% of what we do is build confidence. That's why I said you don't teach them anything, they teach themselves. All we do is motivate them to get to the point where they want to get that information to their frontal lobe. And they want to become avid readers. They want to engage people. They want to spread their wings. We just motivate them to do that. We provide opportunities for them to say, you know what, that was kind of cool. You know, that wasn't so bad after all. Okay. Um, anything else? That's it?
Nothing else.
Cool. All right, let's go. Let's finish up teaching reading. I think that's where we left off yesterday. Um, I may have said this yesterday, but teaching reading is a great opportunity to teach grammar. Okay. Um, unless unless you are instructing a grammar class, unless you are instructing a grammar class, do your best. Unless the title of your course is grammar, do your best never to teach grammar, especially when you're trying to teach a language. Students, learners will never learn a language through grammar. Never. You can teach someone all the grammar rules in the world. They're not going to learn the language. You learn the language through authentic interactions. That's why we want them to read as much as possible. Okay. So don't be, I see a lot of, and I used to do this initially, especially when I was teaching when I first started teaching non-native speakers. I would go through the 8 parts of speech, and then I realized that it wasn't effective. Teaching them the 8 parts of speech, it wasn't effective. All right. It's better that you point out grammar, interesting, compelling grammar points through reading. Reading is the best way to teach grammar. Okay. Remember, don't try to teach the language or teach anything as if one day they're going to be teachers. They're not, you're not teaching them to be teachers. You're giving them information so they can solve future problems. Always look at it from that perspective. That how is this information going to help them solve a problem? Right? That's why I like humanities. That's why I like teaching language arts. That's why I like teaching history. And then because these I can directly connect with solving a problem. All right. And I stray away from teaching. Oh, well, you don't want me teaching math, but math is a little bit harder to connect with problems because it's more quantitative. You can go your whole life without knowing calculus, and most people did. You can go your whole life without knowing trigonometry. You can go your whole life without knowing basic algebra. To be honest with you, all you really need to know math wise is basic arithmetic, how to add, subtract, multiply, divide. You need to know your percentages and decimals and fractions, right? You need to know how to measure distance and weight. Um, but even nowadays, with computers and technology, that's becoming less and less of a necessity, even though um, we definitely want our students to know that. Because as the deeper you get with math, it's harder to connect with real world problems. Okay. Unless, of course, they're going to become scientists and engineers and things like that, then that's more a specialty. All right. So the same thing applies with grammar. All right. And let me say this about grammar. It's also the same thing it is along the lines of accent. Grammar, I shouldn't really get into this because we're going to do this on Saturday. But I'm going to say this briefly about grammar. Grammar is a way to group people. That's all it serves. That's the only purpose the grammar serves. It's the way to say, oh, this person belongs in this group, or this person belongs to this group. Okay. So be very hesitant about grammar. Don't be a grammar Nazi. Okay. As long as your learners are communicating that idea, if you understand what they're saying, then it's fine. Now, when we're talking about teaching writing, which we will talk about later on today, it's a little bit different. Why? In writing, your learner must be grammatically sound because they are not there at the moment in time to explain themselves. So in writing, grammar is essential because the speaker or the author is not there to say, no, I really meant this, or I really meant that, right? So this is why our grammar in writing, our mechanics, our spelling has to be as perfect as possible because we're not there, because writing is an artifact, right? And the problem with writing is you don't want people to infer what you mean. You want to be as clear as possible about what your intent is. This is the key to effective writing. Unless, of course, it's creative writing. Creative writing does something totally different. You want people to be confused. You want them to infer, right? But in academic and business writing, we want to be concise and we want to be cogent. We want to be understandable. We don't want people to guess on what we mean. All right. That's the difficult part about writing is we have to take the ideas in our minds and put it on paper in ways that is clearly understandable by the reader. Okay, but we'll get in that a little later on. So just to point out, when we're teaching reading, there are great opportunities to make grammar points. As I mentioned yesterday, if we're doing narratives, right? And this is why lesson planning is essential. Don't ever have someone tell you that lesson planning is nonsense. I'm hearing that a lot, and it's driving me nuts. We should make it a crime. Okay? Because if you're not lesson planning, then as we said before, how are you getting to the destination at the end of the school year? How are you meeting the standard? How are you scoping, sequencing your lessons? So one day you do one thing and the next thing you do another. How are you considering what resources you need to support the students? Right? So you have to lesson plan. You have to plan. You have to say, this unit, I'm going to deal with narratives. Right? Why am I dealing with narratives? I'm not dealing with narratives just for the simple fact of dealing with narratives. I'm dealing with narratives to talk about things that happened in the past, right? That's why I'm dealing with narratives. So we can talk about things that happened in the past, and I can get the students to write about things that happened in the past. And guess what? In this unit, we're going to talk about the past tense. So that's the grammar point that we're going to talk about. So I'm not teaching grammar just for the sake of teaching grammar. I'm saying if I'm going to talk about the past tense, the past, then the students need to know something about the past tense. And we know when we have our grammar boot camp on Saturday, which you guys are going to hate, you're going to hate me on Saturday. I'm just letting you know right now. You like me now, you're going to hate me on Saturday. But when we have the grammar boot camp on Saturday, when we start getting into the tenses, it's 12 different tenses in the English language. And they can be confusing as heck. And I think in Arabic is what, 21? Isn't it like 21 different tenses in Arabic? Right? Because at some point, as my mentor once told me, there's only two tenses, the past tense and what's happening now. Right? Everything else is subjective, moments of perspective. Either it happened in the past or it's happening right now. But we know that life is not that simple, especially when we have to artifact things, record things. So we have 12 tenses. Okay. So, and to be honest with you, some of those 12 tenses we never have to teach because we do them naturally in speech. It's what Chomsky called universal grammar. Okay. And with universal grammar, you need to know this for TESOL. I want you to take these notes down for Chomsky because you can't take the TESOL course without knowing Chomsky. Noam Chomsky. He is right now, I think he's about 90 something years old. He's still alive. He came up with a theory called universal grammar. And basically what universal grammar says is that that grammar is preloaded into our brains. All right. So think about when you get a smartphone, right? You have some apps that are already preloaded on the phone before you purchase it, right? The phone, the ability to make phone calls, right? Text message. There's some apps that are just preloaded. And even if you try to delete them from the phone won't allow you to delete those apps because they're essential to how the phone operates, right? And then you customize your phone by what? Going to the Play Store and then adding the apps you want to customize your needs, right? So what Chomsky is saying that grammar in itself is something that's preloaded, that we naturally grammar, right? The first Homo sapien, or maybe even Neanderthal, right? They grammared, right? And they probably said verbs first, right? They probably said verbs first. Run, whatever run meant, right? Run, dinosaurs right there. Run, right? So it's something that Chomsky said that universal grammar is something that we automatically do. These patterns are automatically preset in our minds. And it makes sense because, as I told you before, our brains are nothing more than pattern-seeking devices. So that's why we grammar, to communicate, because our brains enjoy patterns. That's why we enjoy playing video games and puzzles, and we like murder mysteries. We want to find the pattern in things. Why do we want to find the pattern in things? We want to find a pattern in things so we can solve problems. We can solve life problems, right? The RAS, the reticular activating system that we talked a lot about, is looking for the pattern. And that if that pattern is not familiar, it sees it as a threat, right? And then that's when the fight, flight, or freeze response happens. Right? Right? Because it doesn't understand the pattern. Okay? That's why we I+1. We introduce something that the student already knows, and we add one thing to it. We give them a pattern that they're already kind of familiar with, and then we add another piece to the pattern. Think about when you play a video game or you do a puzzle, a crossword puzzle. You don't start with level 20, right? You start with a level 1 puzzle, and then you try level 2, and you try level 3 and 4, and you build up. If you try to start with level 20, then you're going to get frustrated. You say, I don't want to know. This is no good. And that's what normally ends up happening, right? Right? We as human beings, we enjoy patterns. And the pattern is normally a crawl, walk, run. Right? We like to test it a little bit, then play with it a little bit more, and then do something advanced with it later. Right? In our relationships, hey, hi, hello. Hey, you mind if I sit here? Hey, what are you doing later on today? Right? Next thing you know, maybe one day you get married to that person. Maybe then one day that person becomes your best friend. But it's normally, and then transactions that happen very quickly tend not to be long term, right? When you just nosedive into something, right? We all had that relationship where it's like, oh, he's amazing, right? Oh, I'm in love. Well, you only know the guy for 2 days. And typically, in most cases, that relationship kind of flusters out really quick, right? In most things, right? But when we take and we go through the pattern that our brain understands, it can understand the pattern, then we tend to hold on to it more. It tends to go where? Into our frontal lobe, our long-term memory. All right? We don't skip any processes. So as educators, we can't skip the process, right? And we have to make sure that we start with something that they do know and we build on it. All right? So that's the same thing when we're teaching reading. It's important that what we teach is appropriate to their age level. This is why we do diagnostics. You cannot teach anyone until you do a diagnostic assessment. We talked about this in learner profiling, right? You need to get to know the students. This is why it's often a bad thing to have students travel around, go from city to city, country to country, because think about it. You enroll them they're in one school one day, another school in the next day. The teachers don't know your child. Because imagine if you are I think we talked about this before. Forgive me if we did. But imagine if you lived in a neighborhood, right? Your family lived in the neighborhood generations, right? And there's the school, the neighborhood school, right? And it has an elementary school, there's a middle school, and there's a high school, right? And you go to kindergarten. So then when you go to the first grade teacher, once she gets the list, she can go to the kindergarten teacher and say, well, how is Sarah? What does Sarah like? What does Sarah need? What does Sarah want? And the second grade teacher will do that to the first grade, third grade, all the way up, because they're right there talking to each other. Well, tell me a little bit. So the seventh grade teacher is going to go to the sixth grade teacher. And there's a record, right? And that teacher can even if the teacher is no longer there, the teacher can go right into the main office, right? And pull your record. Right now it's computers, right? But there used to be a drawer and it had your student file, and they could actually pick up your file. And it can have, you in the 8th grade, and it has your first grade pictures and writing, your third grade this and all this stuff. And the teacher can look at your complete history and see who you are from a holistic perspective, right? But if you go from place to place to place to place to place, people don't know who that learner is, that complete comprehensive learner. So it's hard to really provide what we call it in day two, comprehensible inputs, things that the student already knows, that's understandable. And what, Sarah? What are the two requirements for comprehensible inputs? Things must be blessing. No, not Sarah. I don't know if we covered this, blessing. Um, Comprehensible inputs, crashing. We must give students what? Information that is understandable and what? Compelling. Okay. Well, how does this teacher know if the teacher doesn't know anything about the learner? They don't know what the learner understands, and they don't know what compels that learner. All right. So it's important that when we teach reading, that we know something about our students to make sure what we are giving them is appropriate. And appropriate is not just whether there's cursing or whether there's some cultural uh, red flags. That's what we tend to look for, right? Oh, we're in Saudi and they have a picture. I remember one chapter when I first got here. There was a chapter of I think it was a Q Skills book, and they had Green Day on the unit cover for that unit. It was Green Day. And, oh, we can't do this unit. Oh, there's a singer. This is Saudi Arabia. We can't. The unit was actually a good unit, but they denied the whole unit because of a picture of Green Day in the book. Okay, and that's cool. That's fine if they want to do that because it's a cultural challenge. But that's not the only thing that makes. My point is that's not the only thing that makes something, or the only variable that makes something inappropriate. Yeah, so we definitely need to look out for cultural inappropriateness, but we also need to look out for academic or pedagogical inappropriateness. All right, we talked about it yesterday. How big is the font? How many high frequency words are there? Right? Is the context something that the learner can identify with? Okay, is it something they can identify with? If we give them, if they're reading a textbook about what sixth grade kids do in Australia, well, if the kids in Saudi don't do those things, the Saudi kids probably won't be able to identify with, and that would fall under the lines of inappropriate text or inappropriate language or text, because it's a context they don't understand. So these are things that you have to consider when teaching reading. You have to consider these things when teaching reading. Also remember that when teaching reading, you have to focus the reading. The main things is to get them to understand the gist of what they're reading. In order for them to get to understand the gist, they have to know the context and the theme of what they're reading. So you have to tell them, when you're teaching, this story is about this. This article is about this. You have remember, we're going to preload the questions. We're going to give them the questions first. We're going to have them predict the answers. They're going to talk to one another. Right? Reading is an excellent opportunity for them to talk about one another, make predictions, right? And reread as much as possible. So if there's 3 questions, then they're going to read at least 3 times or more, because they're going to search for the answer for each one of those questions. So that means we don't give them 10 questions, because you're not going to have enough time to go through all 10 questions and do the control practice, if control practice is involved here, or um, or spend the time. I always tell teachers, don't do things that are not worth the time. If it's worth the time, if it's going to lead to the execution or the execution of the objective, then spend time on it. That's why we have SMART objectives. Timely, it's the last one, right? Make sure if we're going to do it, spend the time on it. Don't do it just to do it. We call that busy work. And again, any monkey can give busy work, right? Any monkey can go on teachers supportteachers.com, print out a exercise sheet, a worksheet, and then give it to their students. Anybody can do that. Okay. So we have to, if we're going to have 3 questions, 4 questions, then make sure those questions are meaningful. So ask yourself, what are the purpose of those questions? Is it one question to get the gist, the understanding of the reading? Another question is to do what? Make sure they can understand the details. Another question might be to make sure they can see words that the quicks, make sure they can read in context, right? Is there a word? Is there a lower frequency word in the article that you're pretty sure they don't understand or they might not know, but can they gain meaning from reading in context? Can they predict that word based on reading or predict the meaning of the word based on reading in context? How much time are you going to dedicate to teaching them how to read in context? Because one of the biggest things, and it really frustrates me at my university, is it's exam time. Remember remember what we said a couple of days ago. When you're teaching, you give the answers. When you're testing, you don't give the answers. But what happens in my university that really frustrates me is students take the midterm or they're taking the final exam, right? We put them in this big study hall where they take the test. And then the coordinator of the course comes around and he goes, does anyone have any questions about anything? While they take the test, by the way. And students raise their hand and say, well, what's the meaning of this word? We didn't have this word as a vocabulary. I don't know the meaning. And then the coordinator tells them the meaning of the word. Well, that tells us a lot of things. Number one, that test is probably invalid. Okay, probably not a valid assessment. 2, that tells me that the teacher, if it's a reading course, that tells me that the teacher hasn't taught them how to read in context. Because if that word is there, if you read the sentence before it and after it, and you know the context of the story, you should be able to become very close or get very close to the meaning of that word. Okay, and we talked about co-text a couple of days ago. That's where co-text comes in, co-location, context. All right, we said that what context, Sharon, see if you remember from yesterday. Context is what? The situation what, Sharon? You remember from yesterday? The situation. Sarah, you better don't look at your notes, Sarah. You better know this. I said it 100 times already. Context is what, Sarah? Open your mic and tell me. Context is
something that is commonly known.
Nope. Context is what? I'm gonna help you. The situation. Fill in the blank. Context is the situation. All right, Blessing, turn your mic on. Tell me. Oh, Lord have mercy. God help my soul. Write this down word for word, ladies, because this is important, because this is what you do as teachers. If you do this one thing, you're going to be an amazing teacher. Forget everything else I have said to you over the last couple of days. Just do this one thing. Teach in context. But you got to know what context is. Context, write this down, is the situation the students understand. Context is the situation the students understand. To go deeper, context is the situation the students can imagine themselves in. If you teach in context, that's you've done 90% of what you need to do regarding instruction. Okay? That will make you a very good teacher if you just simply did that and knew nothing else about teaching and learning. Okay? It's the situation the student understands, the situation they can imagine themselves in. And we went over some scenarios a couple of days ago, right? Most learners can imagine themselves being hungry because they know what it feels to be hungry. They may not know what it feels to starve, but they know what it is to be hungry. They know what it feels to be what? Sad, angry, upset, confused. Okay. And the more you get to know about your students through the learner profile, the more context that you can add. This is an argument against textbooks because some textbooks provide context that students cannot imagine themselves in. In America, this was a big deal when I was in high school because we have a test called the SAT. And a lot of Black educators, African American educators, were saying that the SAT is biased, and because a poor Black student taking the SAT cannot imagine, they don't understand a lot of the context that are in the writing, and some of the questions imply that or assume rather that they understand the context. So they get the answer wrong, not because they're dumb, is because they just don't understand the context. All right. The average urban kid in America doesn't go on vacation. The average white, Black, whatever, brown, the average urban kid whose parents are struggling, they're not taking no vacation. Right? So when that child has to take a test and the story is about, or the article is about taking a vacation to Martha's Vineyard, and it makes a lot of assumptions about the things that you do on vacation, then it's highly likely that the learner or that the test taker is going to get those answers right, especially when there's assumptions like, oh, of course, all people do this when they go on vacation. You should already know that. I ain't never been on vacation before. Right? And that was and I think that was a valid argument that people made. And it was not just for Black folk, it was for poor folk. Right? And that's why 10 people of privilege, right? People who do go on vacations, they tend to do well on tests like the SAT because the questions themselves are quite biased to one's experience. So what does that tell us about our teaching? That tells us a lot about our teaching, that we must open the world to, or our learners to the world, even the world that they don't understand. And we got to introduce them to it. That's why we should take urban kids on vacations if we have the money, or go on mock vacations, or do something so when they get these contexts, like on SAT on assessments and other problems that they face, they'll be more likely to be able to solve those problems. Because at the end of the day, we can cry all we want that they're poor and they don't go on vacation. The reality is they're going to get a low score in the SAT. That's the reality. So our job is to prepare learners for the realities. So again, as a principal of a school, or when I was a principal of a school, when a teacher asked me, or teachers asked me to pay for or approve a school trip, I want to know, how is the trip related to the curriculum? If they're going to take time out the school day, then that trip needs to be related to the curriculum. Show me where it's related to the curriculum. Show me how it develops that learner in a way that supports the standards and what we expect from the student to be by the end of the school year. So if they wanted to go to an amusement park, you got a lot of convincing to do for me. Tell me how that amusement park trip is going to support that young person. Now, I would approve amusement park at the end of the school year when they've already taken all the assessments, and it's that 2 or 3 weeks where nothing really goes on. Okay, yeah, go there because we pretty much done everything. But don't ask me to go in some stupid amusement park or to the movies in the middle of the school year, unless that movie has something to do that supports the curriculum or something to do with the curriculum. Okay? Because ultimately, this is what our job is. And the great thing about it is, even if I'm an underfunded school, where we really don't have underfunded schools in America, we just have people who don't budget properly. But if it's a situation where I lost my train of thought. If it's a situation where I can get students, that's what I was trying to say, to get as many contexts as possible, and we don't have a lot of money, I got to do it through reading. Because reading, remember the story I told you yesterday about the young man in Louisiana, right? Even though he's in prison and he's going to be in prison for the rest of his life, he's happy because he has books and he gets to leave the prison via reading. He gets to go to Paris. He gets to go to Australia. He gets to go to Thailand. He gets to go anywhere he wants. I told you. He told the journalist, "Oh yeah, tomorrow, yeah, next week I'm going to go and visit Germany. I forgot what the country said. I'll be in Germany next week. I just came from Paris." He's sitting in a prison cell, and that's the value of reading. And is more important, especially if you're coming from a developing nation. The more, if it's underdeveloped nation, developing nation, there need to be more reading. The less money you have, the less money a community has or a nation has, the more they should be enthralled in reading. Because reading is the great equalizer. If you want to learn and know someone's situation, just read. Often reading is often better than visiting a place. And if you can do both, then home run, right? So we talk about front loading the questions, making sure that you apply what they read. So do something with the reading. They're just not going to answer questions. They do something with the reading. And that something has to relate to what it means to the student. All right. Normally, we ask them to write. Remember, and we're going to go over teaching writing in a second here. Remember that writing is a higher order thinking skill. But because I'm going to cover that in a second. But do something with the reading. Make sure it connects with the learners. Don't just have them read and then go off and do another activity. No, if you're going to spend time reading this article, go all out. All right. If you're very listen, if you're taking if a young man is taking a young woman on a date, that young woman wants that young man to go all out. Right? He doesn't just want to pick you up, take you to the restaurant, and then take you home. Right? She want to go to the restaurant and get the appetizer, the main course, and maybe go somewhere else for dessert, walk around the park, get some flowers. If you're going to take me out on a date, take me out on a date. Right? Take me out. Show me a good time. If you're going to do it, do it. Don't just take me to McDonald's and get me a Big Mac and send me about my way. Same thing with learning. If you're gonna do an activity with the students, be invested in that activity. Understanding that you only got a short time period, 50-minute period, or you only got 2 weeks on this unit, or whatever it is. Because especially here, you got the coordinator always on your butt, pacing. What page are you on? What page are you on? Okay. So you got to keep the human things in mind, because that's a reality. All right. That's what makes our job. The one thing that makes our job difficult are administrators. Administrators are the number one thing that makes our job difficult, because they do everything because they're more concerned with about just getting it done instead of quality. They want quantity instead of quality. Okay. A lot of times you're going to have the learners do a writing activity. But everything they do needs to be personalized. Also, your job is to promote reading. Don't make reading something that students hate. All right. Remember, when you're teaching, you're teaching. When you're testing, you're testing. Don't make reading, and never, I've had teachers that do this. You do something wrong. Well, I want you to go home and write. I want you to go home and read this, and then write something as a punishment. No, don't ever do that. Don't ever make reading or writing a punishment, because then they're gonna associate that activity as a punishment, and then when you ask them to read, then they're not interested in reading because they see it as a punishment. So the consequence should never be you got to read extra pages, or you gotta write a 5-page essay. No, we want learners. We want to attract learners to reading. We want to attract learners to writing. So don't do that when you're teaching reading. Make sure it's a pleasurable experience. Okay. I want a sidebar too. Sometimes we have required reading. All right. And the required reading is not important to go through the whole reading, the whole content. So, for instance, let's say you're teaching 11th graders or 10th graders, and they got to read Moby Dick. Okay. Well, Moby Dick might be too much for them to read for whatever reason. So break it up into chunks. Find the parts of the book that relate to them and just have them read those parts only. And then you could tell them the other parts, the other gaps, or they can predict the other gaps. All right. But we also want to give them advocacy. We talked about advocacy before. So have a time or give an opportunity for them to read in entirety something that they want to read themselves. So you're promoting them, and you're encouraging them to read something from front to back, from the first page to the end. But it should be something that they want to read. Don't have them read War and Peace, because you're going to turn them off to reading. War and Peace is what, 1,000 pages, something like 1,500 pages. It's a nasty read. All right. So don't have them read if the school mandates that they have to read War and Peace, then break it up into interesting chunks and only have them read those interesting chunks. And then, hey, look, you might get a handful of students that want to say, you know what, I'm going to read War and Peace, the whole thing. That's a home run. But you're going to have people like me not going to be interested in reading War and Peace. Okay. But I would appreciate the interesting parts and the parts that are going to help me solve problems in my future. Okay. So don't hesitate to do that. The only problem with that is it's always a thing, right? It's always a caveat is you have to get with whoever is writing the test. If War and Peace is going to be on the test, that means you need to coordinate with them to say, hey, look, we didn't read the whole thing. So my students need to only be answered certain type of questions. Hopefully the school lets you make the test yourself. Okay. All right. Reading. Also, when you always reread. I think we talked about this yesterday. You read for the main idea, you read for details, and then you read to explore and research. You read for the main idea, you read for details to get details, and you read to explore and research other ideas. When you're reading to explore and research further ideas, the students should work together. That's another opportunity to do what? To get them to do what? Speak. Remember, we said yesterday, all these things are opportunities to get them to speak, especially when they read to explore and research further ideas, further concepts. They get to talk about it. And then later on, they can write about it. They talk about it, then they write about it. All right. So, again, when you when you pick an article or you pick a story to read or whatever, make the investment. They're probably going to read different parts of that article story 10, 11 times for the questions you have, and then reading for main idea, reading for details, and reading to explore other ideas and do research. All right. I think we talked about this yesterday. Make sure all the high frequency, all the quicks, all the keywords and context, you preload them. You introduce those words first in the reading. Okay. So that's pretty much teaching reading. Now, so right now we covered speaking, teaching, listening, teaching, speaking, teaching, reading. Let's go over teaching writing. Writing is always an activity connected to a listening activity or a reading activity. You never give the students a writing topic that you have not covered in class. Let me say it again. Never, and let me say it 3 times. Never give the students a writing topic that you have not covered in class extensively. One more time. Never give the students a writing topic that you have not covered in class extensively. Because when you give them a writing topic that they haven't covered in class and talked about in class extensively, you're forcing them to go on ChatGPT and cheat. You're forcing them to plagiarize. You're forcing them to do all the things that we don't want learners to do. When you give them a writing activity, they should have enough ammunition, enough resources to get on in front of that laptop, in front of their notebook, put that pen in their hand, and write. Because they've talked about it a lot. They've applied it, they've discussed it, they played with it, they role played, they did all these things. Now they have something meaningful to say. Because the moment you tell them to go and do this esoteric, have this esoteric question about war and peace, and you think you're so amazing, I have my students consider the postmodern effects, the postmodern implications of, huh? And I've seen teachers brag about this too. And then what happens is this teachers either get this well-written paper that Dr. Ray wrote for them because they paid me to do it, or they go to ChatGPT, right? Or they plagiarize, they copy and paste from the internet. If you want authentic work from students, then you make sure that you make the investment. This is why we back with SMAP. If I know that I want the students to be able to write a 5-page essay about some type of deep question, right? On the Bloom's taxonomy, synthesis and evaluation and analysis, then I need to backwards map out. I can't poop that out in the middle of the unit. Oh, I think I'll have the students write an essay. No, it had to be a part of the initial plan. So before I go into the unit, I know that my goal is to get them to write a 3-page essay on this deal. So then I get to teach that, to prepare them to write the 3-page essay. So all of my teaching is geared towards them writing the 3-page essay. Make sense? But a lot of teachers, they front load their lesson planning, and then they come up with great ideas. Oh, I think the students like this. And then they wonder why they get garbage. And then they stand in the class, you guys plagiarized, you guys cheated, da, 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 da. I don't understand what's going on with these kids nowadays. No, it's your bad teaching. It's your lack of planning. 90% of what we do as educators is plan. It may not go as planned, but we still plan nevertheless. Because when we don't plan, all we do is going and throwing bubble gum against the wall, hoping that it sticks. And I'm going to tell you right now, as somebody who has thrown bubble gum against the wall, it doesn't stick. Okay? So backwards map. It'll make sense when you're backwards mapping. Teaching writing. Establish and develop what? Context. There go that C word again, context. Model it. Ensure, write this down, ladies. Ensure that the students have the appropriate lexis. Not just vocabulary, but word chunks, phrases, idioms, so they can write what you want them to write. Okay? Make sure they have the vocabulary to do it. Personalize. Involve the learner in this experience. There should be a lot of discussion. Right? This topic, it shouldn't be at the end of the unit and then you just pop this topic up. They should your teaching should become so predictable after unit 2 that they know the system. They know, okay, I know we're doing all this discussion and all this stuff because he's going to give us a paper on this. And they're fine with it. If you, I'll tell you something, and I saw this firsthand as a teacher in Baltimore, Maryland. We used to have this thing called the drill. We don't do drills anymore. Drills are bad. Warmers are good. Drills are bad. All right. But when I first started teaching, we were still doing the drill. And one of the things I noticed is one day, like for 2 months, I had the drill on one section of the board. And then one day I had this great idea where I was going to move the drill to another section of the board. Total chaos. Total chaos. Now I'm scratching my head like, guys, why are you making a big deal out of this? No. They had their system, and I disrupted the system. Why? Because our brains are pattern seeking devices. They enjoy the pattern. If you would introduce them to a new pattern and they're not prepared for the new pattern, you will have chaos. That's why Blessing's answer to Sharon's question in the beginning was correct. Create a system at the very beginning and then follow that system throughout the school year. Okay. There's a famous motivational speaker called Zig Ziglar. And Zig Ziglar would tell folks, if you ever get a chance to, you can go on YouTube, Zig Ziglar. I'll put some of his videos up in the Google Classroom. But Zig Ziglar was famous for saying, if you're mediocre, stay mediocre. Don't switch up on people. If you're mediocre, meaning he was talking about businesses, by the way. So if you have a mediocre business, stay mediocre because your customer base appreciates your mediocrity. The moment you switch up on them, you're going to lose them. There was a time where McDonald's tried to have like high-end cafes, and I think they were even going to have waiters at one time. Totally failed. And they had to go back to their original recipe. Listen, think about it. McDonald's does not serve the best hamburger in the world. Right? That McDonald's hamburger is not delicious. But we love it. Why? Because we know we're going to get a product in a certain amount of time, and it's going to taste a certain way, and it's going to cost a certain amount of money. And that is McDonald's recipe. If you go to McDonald's anywhere in the world, yeah, the menu may be a little bit different, but for the most part, those fries are going to taste the same, and you're going to get the same type of service. They're going to sell a Happy Meal. The service is going to be relatively quick, and you know you got about 5 minutes to eat those fries before they get cold and hard. Right? We know that. We know you got about 5 minutes to eat those fries. Sometimes you just got to eat the fries in the car, right? You can't even wait to get home. You got to eat those fries in the car because it takes 10 minutes to get home. And if you wait, you're going to have some cold, hard fries. But we accept it because that's McDonald's. If you're going to stay mediocre, stay mediocre. Do mediocre well. All right. So I'm not saying if you're a mediocre teacher, stay a mediocre teacher. But the point I'm trying to make is have a system and don't switch up on your learners once you have a system. Okay. If you don't have a system in the middle of the school year, don't create a system because you're just going to create more chaos by having a system. All right. So if you are chaotic in the beginning, stay chaotic because you're just going to have more chaos if you try to create a system. So if you're going to do it, whatever you do in the beginning of the year, set that tone, model that tone in the beginning of the year. All right. Personalize, have discussions, generate and share ideas in the vocabulary. Okay. Make sure that every student understands the lexis, what you are expecting. There's a saying that I learned years ago: inspect what you expect. The best way when we're teaching writing or we have students do a writing activity, the best thing to do is give them a rubric. Never assign a writing activity without having a rubric attached to it. Students need to know everything that you expect in that writing. I tell teachers all the time, if you don't attach a rubric to the writing, Number one, don't use a rubric to assess it because then it's not fair. So if you didn't give the students, if you did not give a student or the students a rubric, and then you're using a rubric to assess them, then you are being an unfair teacher. Whatever rubric you're going to use to assess the writing, the students need to know that rubric well. And you should be teaching towards that rubric. Again, that's where backwards mapping comes in. That's where planning comes in. Because now I know I need to create a rubric at the beginning of the school year. And that becomes a part of what I need to instill in my learners. So make sure they know exactly what you expect through the rubric. Okay. Do your best not to grade holistically. We all do at the end of the day when you're grading writing, because grading writing is subjective. We try to avoid holistic grading to make it as fair for every student as possible. Because here's what happens, and this, if you have a lot of students in your class, let's say you have 2 classes of 20 students, that's 40 students, and you got to grade a 5-page paper or a 3-page paper or a paragraph, whatever you're grading. In the beginning of your grading, you're going to be semi-happy and you're going to give high grades. As you get deeper and deeper into grading, you get more and more matter because of the mistakes. Your wife or your husband is bothering you. The kids are bothering you. The phone is ringing. You got the bell done rung. You got to do this. And then you get frustrated, and then you'll notice that your grades will start to dip. Whereas you were giving A's at the beginning, as you get deeper and deeper, it turns into B's and C's. Not fair for those students. So use a rubric. Always give yourself enough time to grade. When you're getting frustrated or people are bothering you, stop grading. Come back later when you have time. I normally grade papers in the middle of the night when everyone's asleep. And I know I'm not going to get any phone calls, distractions, or whatever. Okay. Don't grade the papers in angry when you're angry, upset. Okay. This is important because when students ask you why they got the grade they received, you need to be able to give them a objective reason and not sitting knowing that you were mad or you don't really have a real reason. Which that's where the rubric will assist you, because then you can just point to the rubric. You didn't do this. You didn't do this. You didn't do this. And then they can deal with that. Try your best to get the students to write ideas in class. All right. When the students are writing in class, and then sometimes this is difficult if you have a lot of students, but try to get them to write in class as much as you possibly can. When they're writing, you get a desk and you sit. You have you put your desk in front of the class. You put 2 desks, right? And then you ask students to come up and sit next to you, right? And share their writing. That way, you're giving them a conference, a one-on-one conference, and it could be for 1 minute, 2 minutes about their writing. So any struggles that they're having, they can have them in front of you, and then they can go home and finish it. During this time, it must be quiet time. This is where the rules come in, right? You can't have chaos in this time. It has to be quiet. All right, so students can think. If they're older students, maybe you let them go out in the building, depending on how your school and the environment. You go outside the classroom, they come back one by one. You schedule it, whatever you need to do. But you need to have them have opportunities where they write the first draft in class as much as as possible. And then you sit there. And another thing that I like to do is I like to write with them. So on the same topic. and I can share some of my ideas and ask them, what do you guys think about this? Oh, because they need to see you struggle too. Because they think that you're the writing God, right? So they need to see you say, hey, what you guys think about this idea? All right, that promotes communicative learning, speaking, and they get to see that you're vulnerable. All right. I do this in the university all the time. I'll write an essay right in front of the students, and I'll spell words wrong, and I'm not doing it intentionally. Like I literally just spell the words wrong, make grammar wrong, and I go back, right, and I correct my errors. They need to see that. They need to see that it's okay that you're not perfect. And sometimes, teacher, you spelled this wrong. Teacher. Oh, okay, that's fine. Saturday, when we talk about the difference between errors and mistakes, you see the value in that. All right. So have them write the class as much as possible. Have them share what they're writing. All right. Promote the writing process. The writing process is the Bible. It is the Bible. It is the gospel. You hear me? Now, as somebody who booked the writing process for most of my adolescence, I bucked it. I didn't pre-write, no brainstorming, no outlining. I just went right into it. I did it in college, in undergrad, as an English major. I did it, and it wasn't until I became a teacher and I was in my master's program that I start uh, utilizing the writing process, practicing what I was preaching to my students. And guess what happened? My writing got better. So make sure they understand the writing process. Teach them the writing process. It works. Brainstorming. Well, first, can anybody tell me what the writing process is? Can anyone open their mic? Tell me what the writing process is? No, no, no. Go ahead, Blessing.
Is it from topic, greetings? Is it that?
Say that again. It's what?
Is it the greetings, then the body of the oh
No, no, you're talking about the
what
structure of a
happens?
paragraph.
Oh, okay.
All right, here's the writing process. Writing process. Forgive my bad handwriting. All right. First, brainstorm. All right. Or today they like to call it pre-writing activities. Essential. At the university, I tell my students at the university that this is the most important part of the writing process. Brainstorming, pre-writing activities. Okay, pre-writing activities. Here's where they're going to think about their topic. They're going to what you want them to have, what you want them to be able to do or do here is create the topic sentence or the thesis statement. All right. And this should be you should give them a lot of time. This should be one class. This might be even a week. A week work with if you have time. This is why you got a yearly plan, guys, ladies. The result of a good brainstorm should be the thesis statement. If they're older, if they're writing essays, or if they're younger, if they're like middle school or below, the topic sentence. Because maybe they're only writing one paragraph. All right.
They cannot move from the brainstorm until they have a solid thesis statement or topic sentence. Because if they have a solid thesis statement or topic sentence, that means they have thought properly about their writing and what they're going to write. Also, they would be collecting a lot of details supporting ideas during this time because you need that to create a thesis statement or topic sentence. Okay. Do I need to cover what a thesis statement and topic sentence is? Should I cover that? Yes or no? I don't want to cover it if you already know. Yes, no. Should I cover it real quick?
Cover.
All right. Topic sentence. Anytime you write a paragraph, every paragraph that you write must have a topic sentence. If a paragraph does not have a topic sentence, you don't need to have, or if a group of sentences does not have a topic sentence, you do not have a paragraph, and that will throw your essay off. It will make your essay lack coherence and cohesion. So when you write, okay, there's two things that you want when you write. In your writing and in your students' writing. You want coherence. Oh, my handwriting is horrible on this board. Coherence and cohesion. Coherence is, all that means is your writing is understandable. We kind of talked about that in the beginning of the session. Your writing is understandable. That's all coherence means. Coherency. Cohesion means that all of your ideas are connected. Okay. So if you have a paragraph that doesn't have a topic sentence, it kills your coherence and it definitely kills your cohesion. Because what is the purpose of that paragraph? Every paragraph in an essay works for the thesis statement. Okay, so a topic sentence has two characteristics. In order to have a topic sentence, you have to have the topic, you have to have the controlling idea. The topic and the controlling idea. That's what makes a topic sentence. The topic sentence can be the first sentence in the paragraph. It could be in the middle of the paragraph. It could be at the end of the paragraph. I prefer that it be at the beginning of the paragraph to make it plain and clear to your reader what this paragraph is about. Again, as I said earlier, there's no need to trick the reader. To be very plain and simple, especially in academic writing, business writing, what this paragraph means. Why is it important to the larger idea? Okay. So the topic sentence is the boss of the paragraph. It tells you the topic and controlling idea. So I'll give you an example. Global warming will have a detrimental effect on economies that depend on agriculture. Okay. So that's my topic sentence. Global warming will have a detrimental effect on economies that depend on agriculture. So, Sharon, what is my topic? What's the topic of the sentence? Yeah, mic's off.
Warming.
Say that again. I can't hear you.
Global warming.
Global warming is my topic.
Yeah.
And my effect and my controlling idea is what? What is it, Sarah?
Will take effect.
Yeah. Everything else is my controlling idea. That it will have a detrimental effect on economies that depend on agriculture. So everything in this paragraph has to deal with what? Must deal with what? Global warming having a detrimental effect on economies that agricultural based economies. If it talks about economies that depend on services, if it talks about economies that depend on natural gas or fossil fuels, then we call that breaking unity. Okay, every sentence must deal with agriculture, global warming, and the effect of agricultural societies or cultures or agricultural countries or countries that depend on agriculture and the effect that global warming will have on it. Not about any other type of economies. All right. So that's a topic sentence. A thesis statement is a statement that is the boss of. Oh, I messed that up. I don't know how to use this daggone thing now. What do I need? Okay. I'm sorry. I've hopefully you guys got those notes. A thesis statement. Hold on, I think I could hold on a second. Let me see something. No, I'm messing up big time. I'm messing up even more. Okay. Forget that. Just scroll down. So a thesis statement is a statement that controls an essay. And a thesis statement has three parts. It has the topic. All right. So it has to have a topic. The topic must be specific. Okay. So when you're writing, the more advanced you get in your writing, so high school, middle, elementary school, we talk about broad topics. Middle school, we still talk about broad topics with a little bit more focus. High school, we talk about more specific topics, but more specific, but not too, too specific. College, university, 4 years, we talk about specific things, but in a very general manner. But then when you get in post grad, you talk about very minute, small topics, right? When you get a PhD, your dissertation is about one little small little aspect of something. All right. So basically, the more advanced you get, the more specific your writing gets. You imagine a magnifying glass, right? And you just magnify it more and more and more and more and more and more and more. As you magnify it, higher you become in your level. Make sense? So in a thesis statement, the topic should be specific, must be specific. Where in a topic sentence, the topic can neither be too specific or too general. Right? So in a paragraph, the topic should neither be too specific or too general. Right? So basically, when you write an essay, you have a collection of topics that are neither too specific or too general that support what? A thesis statement that is very specific. Make sense? So it's almost like an inductive reasoning, if that makes any sense. Because inductive reasoning, we go from the specific to a broader generalization. Make sense? That's the difference between inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. Okay. So at writing essays is really an exercise in inductive reasoning. All right. So the thesis statement must be specific, very specific. Another characteristic, it must be a roadmap. Excuse me, let me say this first. It must be debatable. Debatable. You cannot have a thesis statement that is not debatable. Okay. So when students, this is why students must brainstorm, because they have to decide a position and then defend the position. Thesis statements are not neutral statements. Somebody may disagree with the thesis statement. Make sense? All right. So you can't have a thesis statement that pretty much says, everyone needs water to survive. Right? Nobody can debate. That's not something to debate about. We know that everyone needs water to survive. We know that. That's kind of evident. Okay. So major element of a thesis statement is that it must be debatable. Third is it must be a roadmap it must give you a roadmap to how you're going to prove this debatable idea. Okay. So you need to consider the major elements that you're going to use, the major points of evidence that you're going to use to support your debatable statement. All right. So let me try to write a good thesis statement for you. I'm gonna attempt. Urban literacy programs that target inner city youth ages 10 to 12 must include extensive living classroom opportunities that must conclude to that support which let's say which support context, codex, and self-referential thinking. All right. So that would be an example of a thesis statement. I have my very specific topic, urban literacy, that targets inner inner youth ages 10 to 12. You see how specific that is? All right. I didn't just say urban literacy programs. I'm telling you the ones that the age group that is going to target, not the ones that target, you know, 4 to 9, but the ones that target 10 to 12. That's very specific, right? And then I give you a roadmap to explain why. Must include uh, extensive living classroom opportunities which support context, co-text, and differential self-referential thinking. Um, and I can even go further because these variables are not innate to lower income learners. All right. So there's an element of debate. It's debatable because somebody may not agree with this, and I give you a roadmap. So in my essay, that I'm going to include the idea, things about context, co-text, self-referential thinking, and lower income earners. So I can expect in this essay, I'm going to have topic sentence about context, co-text, self-referential thinking, lower income learners, living classrooms, right? So I can see how the essay is going to form just by my thesis statement. You got it? Is that understandable? So that's the difference. If you're teaching younger kids, you don't have to worry about thesis statement at the moment. So when I'm teaching the writing process, my goal is to have the students. My goal is to have the students brainstorm to the point where they can write the thesis statement or the outline. Thesis statement. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Thesis statement and produce or a topic sentence. That's what I meant to say. So they can write a thesis statement or a topic sentence. That's the goal. A lot of times, teachers have students brainstorm we're creating ideas, but the students don't know what to do with the ideas that they have created. Okay, you brainstorm, you collect ideas, you free write or you write some words down, or you create a list. Then the students don't know what to do with it. Well, how is this going to help me write the paper? So we don't give students enough ammunition, resources to do something with the brainstorm, and a lot of times students just skip the brainstorm. Okay, after the brainstorm, and they do that, and again, in my opinion, that is the most important part of the writing process. Then it's outlining. Here, the key to outlining, the central element of outlining is so they can organize, they can aggregate what they have collected in the brainstorm, so they can aggregate the brainstorm. All the word aggregate means to separate in meaningful ways, and also discard, so they can discard information that doesn't really fit the thesis statement that they wrote, because now they have the thesis statement, right? Now they can take all those things they collected in the brainstorm and organize it in a way, say this is important to what I'm going to write, this is not important, I could throw this away, I could prioritize this. Okay, and then they can put it in a sequence, a logical sequence. So all the information that they want to keep, they could put it in a logical sequence, or order, sequence order. And that's the value of the outline. So think about when a director is directing a movie and it's time to edit the movie, right? The director will put the scenes in certain order to tell the story the best way, right? So when they shoot a movie, they shoot all these different scenes, right? They shoot all these different scenes based on the screenplay, okay? And then after all the scenes are finished, the actors are gone home. They're finished. Actors shoot their scenes and they go home. But the movie needs to now be edited. And part of the editing process is what? The director figure out what scenes he doesn't want, right? So a lot of times the actors are shooting scenes that never make the movie. Make sense? They shoot scenes that never make the movie. And you see it. Sometimes you see it in if it's like a famous movie, they say, well, this is a scene that never made the movie, right? Because the director, once he starts to do the cuts and edits to the movie, he decides how he wants to tell the story based on the scenes. So he takes stuff out, right? He might add certain effects and things like this. So he's creating an outline, a logical sequence. Okay. So that's the importance of outlining. I don't like this whiteboard. Why does it do that? All right. Can I do this? Okay. Oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. Oh, okay. I'm learning. All right. So then after the outline, then you have the drafting process. So now that you have storyboard your ideas out in a logically sequential matter, to a way where you believe it's going to tell the story effectively. Oh, that's another point that I want to make real quick. Anytime you're writing, you're telling a story. Everything is a story. I don't care if it's academic, business. Everything is always a story. If you keep that in mind, you'll always be a good writer. Everything is always a story. Okay? Whatever you're trying. So once you write the thesis statement, once you write the topic sentence, now you know what you want to write and you know what the destination is. Now tell the story. Because we said yesterday, right? Isn't that how we began yesterday's lesson? By saying the stories, people love stories. So always write like you're telling a story. And trust me, your writing will be effective. It's more likely to be cohesive, and it's more likely to be coherent, have good coherence. Okay. So then we just draft. Now, how many times should we draft, Sarah? In the writing process, how many times should we draft? First draft, second draft, third draft. How many times? 2 times? 2 drafts? Sharon, how many times should we draft?
3, maybe.
3 times? Blessing, how many times should we draft?
I will say, depending on the time frame you have, 2 times.
2 times? See, almost
Yes.
had the answer right. Hey, I thought you was going to know that answer. Then you said 2. Madison, are you there? Or did you walk away? Madison walked away. The answer is you were almost there, Blessings. You said depending on the time, because you're right. We have a pacing. So it does depend on the time, because you can't spend all semester on it, one thing. But what we want to tell students is you draft as many times as you need. As many times as you need, you draft. If you need to draft 10 times, draft 10 times. Draft it. There's never a perfect writing. There's never a perfect draft. Everything can always change, right? There are authors who wrote masterpieces and said, "That's a masterpiece." That was the only reason I sent it in is because my agent told me that the book was due. I didn't like it. It was horrible. I thought it turned out to be a masterpiece. Okay, so there's never a perfect draft. Okay, but again, we have deadlines, obviously, and at some point, this is why it's important that we give students enough time to write. It goes back to what I said earlier. If you're really invested in it, invest in it. If you're backwards mapping and you know you want them to write a 5-page essay, then you need to invest in that and you need to give them the appropriate amount of time. And remember when we talked about Camara DeVello's possibilities, particularity, practicality, possibilities? Remember we talked about that? And we said the possibilities were about being brave. This is the way you have to be brave. To your administrator, to your department chair, and say, "Hey, look," because you'll get some department chairs that say, "You want students to write 5 essays in one semester." You say, "Hold on a second, no, no. I'm not going to ask an 8th grader to write 5 essays in one because now I'm rushing through the process and I'm going to make them hate writing. I'd rather than write one essay, and it may take us 3 months to write one really good essay, than write 5, excuse my French, shitty essays. And then make them think that they're great writers, and then they get to university and the professor just says, "Who taught you how to write?" Because we want quantity over quality. Okay? Now, again, and I'm going to close because I know it's 1 o'clock. Again, I didn't say this. I always say this to my TESOL classes. All the things that I'm saying to you is in the idyllic world. Okay? This is for me. This is an opportunity for me to live my fantasy of being or what perfect teaching would be. The reality is, some of you already work for schools or will work for schools that's going to tell you you got to do 5 essays in one semester. And guess what? As a teacher, you got to make it work because they're the person at the end of the day who's signing your paycheck. And the bills got to get paid. That's just the simple reality. So all the things that I'm saying to you is in the idealistic world. But if you get a chance to really explore possibilities and you get a chance to do it right, know the best practices. Be brave, be the learner's champion, and say to the coordinator, say to the academic director, "No, this is not right. I'll do it, but understand this is not good pedagogy, and these are the reasons why. How can we teach them the writing process? When will they have time to brainstorm? How are they going? They need to draft as many times." Because when you especially when you put a deadlock time limit on essay writing, what you're doing now is not teaching, you're testing. And there's a difference between teaching and testing. When you're teaching, you're teaching. When you're teaching, you take the time. You reteach. You give the answers. When you're testing, there's a time limit and you don't give the answers. Okay? A lot of times what many schools do is they spend the school year testing instead of teaching. This is why every time you turn around, there's a test. Midterm test, unit test, final exam, this type of test. Well, how? When the hell is teaching going on in that school? Oh, there's a test. We got to prepare for the test. Test. Well, when are we teaching? But you know what? Isomorphism, I said this word a lot. isomorphism is a virus to the education system. It's a virus because we see one school do it, and the people say, "Oh, they're so amazing because they have all these tests. They have the Cambridge test. They're using this test. They're testing online. Test, 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 test." And nobody's brave enough to say, "Well, when the hell is teaching going on?" Okay. So you draft as much as possible, given the fact that you're going to have a time limit, obviously. But again, this is another argument for what? Backwards mapping. So you can plan this stuff out at the beginning of the year. You know you only have this amount of time and where you want to prioritize your teaching. To again make this person contribute to this person being an adult problem solver. That's your only job as a teacher, is to contribute to these bodies, these young people, to one day become adult problem solvers. Okay, so you draft. The next step is to publish. At some point, you just excuse me. I'm sorry, not publish. It's to edit. When you're drafting, you're revising. Now, a lot of people get this wrong. They put revising and editing together. No. Revising is drafting. You revise for ideas. Always remember that. You revise for ideas. Don't worry about grammar in your drafting. Don't worry about mechanics when you're drafting. Now, people like me who write a lot, yes, I do edit while I go along. That's because I got timelines, deadlines, and I'm trying to do it as efficiently as possible. But I think I'm a pretty decent writer too. But for our learners, you want them to only worry about the creation of authentic ideas, high level ideas, moving up Bloom's taxonomy. So the draft is about ideas, not drafting for edits. Once they are happy with their ideas, then they edit. And then what are they editing for? Spelling mistakes, mechanics, right? Spelling mechanics and grammar. All right, ensuring that you have coherence. That they have coherence and cohesion. Same thing. Same thing for the revising. Revising, they're still looking for. They're still looking for. Oh, come on now. They're still looking for. Why is it not? They're still looking for coherence and cohesion. It's just the coherence and cohesion of ideas when they're revising. When they're editing, it's the coherence and cohesion regarding the grammar rules and the mechanic rules and spelling. Because if you spell too many words wrong, you kill coherence. If your mechanics wrong, you kill coherence. If your grammar's wrong, you kill coherence. Okay? And then the last step in the writing process is publishing. Then you publish it. Right? You publish it. For students, they give it to the teacher grade it. But if you're really good, if you really invest time in it, you actually have them publish it. Huh? They spend all this time working on this project. Then you're gonna put your little funky grade on it, like you somebody special. Oh, it's an A. It ain't special. That grade don't really mean anything. We know what has the better value if they get to publish it. Create a Facebook group. Create some type of website where they can publish their work and the world can see it. Have them create a TikTok account or some type of account where it's totally educational and they get to publish their work. And how about this, ladies? They get to journal their writing process experience. Their writing process journal, from brainstorming to outlining. From brainstorming to publishing. How about that? How about that is a way of integrating technology and getting them to what? Be connect with, because they love to text, they love to publish things onto internet. To get them connected, involved, make it interesting. Okay? So you get them to publish, and that could be, again, published to teacher or published to some other platform or both. Sometimes some schools don't allow you to do that. Well, publish on the school wall. Huh? In the classroom. On the school wall. That's why you have bulletin boards. It makes me mad because I walk into schools and I never see real good in-class bulletin boards. The bulletin boards you see in the classroom is stuff that the teacher brought from Jareer. I don't want to see that nonsense of stuff that was brought from Jareer. Bulletin boards should be made up of student work. When the students come to class, they should see their work on the board, their effort on the board, not your talents, and not something that they bought from Jareer, the teacher bought from Jareer, or the school bought from some publishing company. That's nonsense. That's the first sign of a very bad school if you see a bunch of pre-made professional junk on the wall. And that's what it is, junk. I need to see student work. I need to see their efforts. Just like when you go to a kindergarten class and the student's hand and everything is in the student's work, it should be in all grades. All right. So find a way to publish their work. If you can't publish on social media, in the classroom, in the school hallways. So when it's parent-teacher night, what? You know what's going to happen? You'll look like a genius because all your students will be grabbing their parents saying, look at my work on the wall. Look at my work. Look, look, look. Okay? Because students like to see their work. We're all narcissistic. We like to see our stuff. We all have those amygdalas in our brain. We all have an amygdala. What's in it for me? All right. So take advantage of their amygdalas. That's why I told you about that second day, about the brain. Take advantage of it. Put their work on the wall. Don't buy anything from Jareer. The last part of the writing process, and then I'll shut up, is rewriting. Remember, if you're going to invest in it, invest in it. All right, rewriting is imagining. All right. And again, you might not have time based on your syllabus or whatever to rewrite, but if you have the opportunity to rewrite and have them reimagine, all right. It reminds me of a television show called Whose Line Was It? Whose Line Is It? Whose Line Is It Anyway? Something like this, right? We have different people come up and do different skits about different topics. It's interesting to see how people would perform the skit. Well, you have them write something. Now, write this from the perspective of this person. Write this from the perspective of that person or this situation and see how it changes. Because what we want to create, as we said earlier, many different contexts. We want to introduce them to many different contexts. And ladies, it doesn't cost money to do that. They can do that for free. Right? Because they need to know if they're going to have sympathy and empathy for people, they need to know truly the different perspectives. Okay? All right, it's well past our time. This is my first time actually going over the time. Saturday, we're going to do 5 hours. We'll take an hour break in between every 2 hours because you need that break. We're going to go over, we pretty much finished teaching writing. We're going to go over the grammar boot camp, which is going to suck. I'm going to go over noticing errors and mistakes, and I'm going to go over some phonology. Okay, which a lot of you guys are teaching young kids, so you already know, but we're going to cover it. And then we're going to go over, yeah, that's it. But that's going to cover most of the grammar boot camp is going to cover most of the time. But we can't have this course without covering grammar. All right. Thank you for sitting with me, listening to me for.
We don't have a mic, Ray. You're out.
Can you guys hear me now?
We'll be still on same time online.
Yeah, so we'll start at 10. We'll go 10 to 12, take a break, 3 to 4, take a break. And in that in the 6th, something like that. Okay. Or if you guys don't want to do that, we can go into next week. It's up to you.
Can we do it on site? Is it possible?
Can we do it on site?
Yes.
We could do it on site. That will make it faster.
Yeah, that would be better.
So you guys can come to my compound and we could do it on site if you want. It's up to you.
I'm open for it.
So you guys could talk about it. Let me know by tomorrow. And yeah, if we do that, it could be faster than the 5 hours.
At the same time?
Yeah, we can start at 10. Well, we start at 11. So if we come on site, yeah, we can still do 11. We can still do 11. That's fine. Or if you want to do it earlier to knock it out, tell me. I'm fine with it. Whatever you want me to do.
I think 10 from 10, 10, 10, it will be good.
All right.
Yeah.
So you guys talk about it amongst yourself, and then let me know about tomorrow. We can start at 10 and then go, and then 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 1, 1, 2, 2 to 3. About 3 o'clock, you'll be finished.
How can we connect to ourselves, guys?
Huh?
I'm thinking of how we can connect to ourselves.
Oh, I'll put everybody in a WhatsApp group real quick.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank
Or
you.
no, I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that. You're in the Google Classroom. You can talk to each other in the Google Classroom, in the streaming. I'll just make a WhatsApp group, make it easier.
That will be faster. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So let me know
Thank
about
you.
tomorrow, and then I'm fine either way. All right.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.